My parents saved their whole lives for retirement, never went on vacation, no luxuries, but one surgery for my mom wiped almost all of it out. They followed every rule, still lost. That's America. 64% of Americans have $0 after paying their bills. The problem with this country is people who make $700 per hour have convinced people who make $25 per hour that people who make $7.25 per hour are the problem. Now, all these statements you just heard are very common sentiments shared amongst Americans. And today here in this video, we're going to hold a discussion revolving around all these thoughts and opinions regarding this topic right here. And how, according to the news and whatever your wacko aunt is saying on Facebook, the downfall never really seems to stop in this country despite who's in office. Well, if you personally feel like you relate to anything discussing the crumbling society around you, or you simply dislike videos discussing topics like this, feel free to like, share your thoughts, opinions below, and subscribe to see my daily uploads around here discussing topics just like this. And I always like to start these videos out by giving a huge shout out to everybody who supports my content around here, my channel supporters, my Patreon supporters, and everybody who checks those links down below in the description. Those are some of the best ways to support me and the content around here. Now, let's begin this shit show.
How did we go from fighting a revolution over a 2% tax on a breakfast beverage to what we pay today? And we're taxed on money when we receive it, when we spend it, when we keep it, when we invest it, and even when we die with it. It gets worse. We commute to work to make that money in a car that is taxed again to register on roads we're already taxed to build, fueled by gas that is taxed even further, and many times through tolls that tax you again. And that's to maintain bridges and highways and tunnels that already have billions of dollars, taxpayer dollars, allocated to them, and they're still falling apart. And then when you get to your office that is taxed to exist, in a corporation that is also taxed to do business, that almost certainly requires permits and other things, which are another tax, you are paid a paycheck that the corporation must match another payroll tax on top of what they have to pay you. Then you go to a home of which you are taxed to own every single year that we bought with money that the government already taxed us on.
Now, the tax system here in America is a more than debatable topic, and with some people on the fence saying that it's needed and the only way to really solve problems for the community, and the other side of the fence being really on the side, in my opinion, that makes the most sense, being like, it was really never really supposed to be a whole place to run society in the first place. It was really just a small thing to kind of get us back from our ever-growing debt that we had back in the day that now it just seems to be funding us, and now we're continuing to go into it anyway. So, you know, and there's this meme, or this picture, this kind of like painting that I was going to touch on here in this video as well, where back in the day, people would go to literal war. They would have a whole revolution over like a 2% tax. And now in most states, not most states, but in some states like California or some other ones, you can get up to over 50% taxes. Like literally half of the year you're working just for the government, which I don't know if that really constitutes slavery, but it sounds like you're not really working for yourself at the end of the day. Also, these taxes, you really have no if, ands, or buts. You really have no say about it. You really just have to pay them, or else, you know, you're going to be, your assets that they convince you that you own will be taken away, which we're actually going to discuss here in another video coming up here in this video, where you think you really own stuff in this country, and no matter how hard you work, no matter how much you pay, no matter how much you suck off the person above you, if you don't really do everything right, you don't really stay on the path that you were, you know, destined to be, or really forced to be on that straight line, you're going to get your assets taken anyway. So let's touch on that.
Once you own your home, you should own it. Losing a $200,000 house you've lived in for 20 years, over $2,500 in taxes, is theft.
And as ridiculous as this might sound for some of you guys, this genuinely is a common problem that many people face here in the States, where they come into this issues. They fall in a rut, which happens time and time again throughout almost all of our lives, and they can't pay all the bills, and everything they have going for them just gets sucked up and taken away to pay those small bills that are really just small hurdles, but end up just, you know, that small little rut ends up being an overwhelming earthquake that just sucks up everything in sight, at least for that said individual. And this isn't always a sentiment. Obviously, there's so many ways to get out of these things, like relief plans, cover plans, hopefully you have insurance, but at the end of the day, kind of crazy to think.
Let me put today's housing market in perspective for you. If you had a job making $3.60 per hour and worked a full-time job all year, you could afford a house, where the median home price is about $23,000 to $25,000. Today, in order to have the same amount of buying power in buying a home that somebody making $3.60 in 1970 had, in 2025, you would have to make exactly $57.32 an hour full-time all year with no time off to maybe afford a home.
Now, as much as I really do see the whole point here is trying to, you know, relate to the boomers and the older people in our family, because let's be honest, the generations are kind of getting divided of what the change is in the economy and the time frame that we're living in compared to the places that other people in our family were living in their 20s, my 20s now is different than that in their 20s, but that's kind of how it's always been throughout all of time. But if you definitely put it into perspective like this, you can definitely tell the difference. And I think it is kind of good to put this into perspective here for many people that maybe can't really see it just by, living their life. Or maybe they're out of the loop now because they have already made it for themselves. But at the same time, I don't think it's all healthy to dwell on this for too long. I feel like that's really all we do is just, hammer down the fact that things are different and that things aren't the same as the past, which has never really been the case ever in reality, to be honest. Things always change, and the past could maybe be better in certain aspects, but who knows what the future might hold. Maybe we'll have a better economy in the future, and then people in 100 years will be looking back saying, man, that 2050 economy, wasn't that something you really should have been living around there? Look at the charts and the stats. So try to live in the present, because that's really all we can do. I'm not saying I know the answer. I'm living through the crazy cost of living and the inflation that seems stronger than ever, but at the same time, I feel like it's not always the most healthiest thing to just dwell in the past. So maybe try to put this in perspective if you can, to hold your relationships, or maybe put some glue on them. But at the same time, maybe if people have different opinions, those just really aren't your real people at the end of the day.
You'd be amazed. I get letters from 80-year-old farmers saying, can you find me a young person
Yeah, of course.
to inherit my farm?
I know.
Because if I give it to my kids, they're just going to sell it for housing developments, and I'd like it to stay as a farm.
Well, there's not only farms that are in that situation. There's an immense number of small businesses in the U.S. that are very profitable, that aren't glamorous, that make a great living, that have an established customer base, that are run by people the same age who are desperate for someone to continue their operation.
Plumbers, electricians, all these durable trades.
Now, in regard to pretty much every topic I cover here on the channel, I try to put myself in everybody's shoes, and at least, in some sort of way, because I'm an empath at the end of the day, I try to think. And, I don't really like when people label themselves as things, but that seems to be my fate. So, I can kind of see how maybe somebody wouldn't want to, follow in their father's footsteps. Maybe they're not really into the industry or the business that they're running, but at the end of the day, if you have a straight shot in success or a comfortable living these days, that is a blessing and something that many people never will have actual access to, especially having something in your family. I actually have a couple people local to me who they have parents who have decently established companies and local businesses with a very solid reputation, and they're damn near set for life because of their father's whole, life that they're going to inherit once he, perishes, passes, and his time is done here on this earth. And so, also I do find myself somewhat envious maybe in a way, and I kind of don't have much sympathy for people who just completely opt out and give up these sort of opportunities and blessings, because if you maybe even heard any of my stories in the past, I lost my father when I was a young man, the day before I turned 15, and I genuinely feel like as a man, it's very good to have a strong father role model, especially in your early years, in your youth, and your upcoming to adulthood, and you can actually have that throughout your adulthood and into your longevity, 30s, 40s, and then inherit you're basically standing on the shoulders of giants, and that's not the best way to really get ahead if you're already starting at a better starting point than the other person that you're in the race with. It's basically like jumping in front of the race before the referee says go. That's what a lot of these people are doing, and they're just giving up that position just because they just don't want it. Now, I do understand there's a lot of different things that come with that, and I definitely would like to hear those reasons, but at the end of the day, it's hard for me to provide sympathy for these people because I've never had these types of grace myself. So yeah, folks, that's going to wrap up today's shit show of an episode, and I'd love to hear all your guys' thoughts and opinions regarding any topic that we discuss here in today's video, or any other topics you'd love to hear me touch on in the near future. Again, I always like to give a huge shout out to everybody that supports the channel around here, so if you want to check out those links down below in the description, the Top Ramen Noodle Fund could definitely use a few dollars. I'm just saying, it's kind of a joke, but I definitely appreciate you guys who do go such a long way. Shout out to you guys. Hope you enjoyed. Thanks for stopping by. I hope to see you in the next one, and I'll catch you later. Bye.